All right, I'm back with Frida, and she's chewing a this is actually a collagen stick from our buddies over at Barkworthy's. If you have dogs that are not a commercial for Barkworthy's, but having collagen sticks or bully bites, which are bull penis parts, kneecaps, tracheas, those are great things for dogs to chew on. It releases feel-good endorphins. It's a nice way to keep them occupied. I'm forgetting her name. Mila, we left behind when we shot the videos above. We gave her one of these and she just sat down. She was chewing normal. She barked for a second and then she went back to chewing it. She's actually under the camera chewing on one right now. So having high value chew items, especially for barky dogs or stressful dogs, like when people come over, if you give them something like this to chew on, they're occupied. They're not barking at your guests, they're not nipping them, things along those lines. Now, Frida here, is a little bit of a food guarder. Now, sometimes they guard food but don't guard other objects. She wasn't guarding the one that was on the floor that Mila is chewing on right now. But if you do notice that's the case, you could take a drill a hole through this side, and we have some dumbbells there. Take a zip tie and zip it to the dumbbell over there. So the only place I can chew on this is over there. I can't go and guard around the other dog. So that's why you can kind of have two of them in the room and they can chew without having to worry about any fights or anything breaking out. Now for this one, we went over, I'm going to go over kind of an inverted order. Towards the end of this session, I went over how to teach Frida here not to freak out when her guardians embrace. When they hug each other, she barks and nips at them. So what I had them do is doing it, kind of a version of what we did on the video above, is doing it in sections. At first I had them stand up and just turn to face each other, turn away, yes, and she got a treat. Then they turned and they raised their arm a little bit. Turn back, yes, and got a treat. Then raise their arm a little bit more. Eventually they're reaching towards each other. Eventually they're touching each other. Eventually they're embracing very briefly. And then she gets a treat afterwards. This makes all those activities what we call a precedent. That means when my humans hug or kiss or whatever it is, I get a treat at the end. But if she reacts, like the video above, it's too much. It's too intense. So instead of actually touching each other, maybe we just stand up, turn and face each other, and reach partially towards. So ask yourself, how can I make it into a smaller step? Help the dog practice that small step over and over. After 2, 4, 8 times, the dog's good. Then we make that step a little bit more pronounced and gradually work our way up to the real world situation. But again, she can't react. If they react, then all that kind of fouls up all of your work. So go slow and steady. And after a while, she's like, can you guys hug? Because that gets me a treat. All right, we also went over, she does not like the harness being attached, the leash being attached, and she might not like the harness either. So we did something called a CER, a conditioned emotional response. Now when I do that, I have, let's say this is the thing she doesn't like, this hand has a bunch of treats. I have both my hands behind my back, and the camera is the dog. I swing out the thing the dog doesn't look, she looks at it, I say yes, goes away, and then I give the dog a treat from my other hand. So my hands are kind of going in kimbo like this. Why don't you stay here with me? I'm too ugly to be in the shop by myself. I need a schnauzer. At first we were just holding it up, she just looked at it and went away. So looking at it causes it to go away. After a while we hold it up a little bit closer to her, but we don't ever, I usually do this when I'm kneeling, and it never passes my knee. I want the dog to not feel like it's coming towards them because they already have a negative response. But eventually I'm holding it up here and the dog is leaning towards it, and I say yes, and it goes behind my back. Eventually I hold it up and they're touching their nose to it, yes, and then put it behind my back. So all we're doing is just showing them, and at first I have it kind of bunched up, and I had you take all this accoutrement. You add like poop bags and other stuff on the leash, just makes extra stuff swingy, it makes it harder. Eventually I want to kind of hold it up where the leash part is, this is the clip, is hanging down a little bit, so it's a little bit closer to what is going to happen when I attach it to her. And then I would do the same thing. So at first I'm just looking at it and get a leash, or get a treat. But eventually once she's touching her nose to it, and again, it might take 3 or 4 or 6, 8 practice sessions before you get to that point. But eventually what you want to do is then you're going to take the leash and lean it towards her a little bit, pull back and give her a treat. Then extend it towards her a little bit more, pull it back, give her a treat. Eventually you're touching it to, and reaching over a dog can cause it to be intimidating. So you're just reaching it a little bit over her, it goes away, she gets a treat. So it'll take some time in practice, but eventually you'll be able to touch the D-rings, pull it away, and she gets a treat. And eventually you clip it, and then she gets a treat. So putting a leash on helps me, or is something I like, look as a positive, not a negative. Now I would also, again, in small steps, if she backs away or turns away, that's her cutoff signal. So if she refuses to look at you, cutoff signal. Don't practice with, like I said, crazy stuff's going on, or if she's really anxious or nervous or overly tired, we'd like her to have a little bit of exercise and about 10 minutes of rest before you practice this, or just a time when she's pretty relaxed. But if there's other stuff that's going on, we're just influencing with a crying baby or the leaf blower or the other stuff, don't do it then. practice this. If you're going to put her on the leash, maybe in an hour, maybe I start practicing this an hour beforehand. I spend like 2 minutes doing the CER exercise. Then we stop. And then about 15 minutes later, we do the CER exercise again. Now she's leaning towards it. We stop. And then eventually she's touching it. 15 minutes later, we stop. Then the fourth time, maybe 5 minutes before we're actually walking, I'm extending the leash towards her, pulling it back, giving her a treat. And then I do it a fifth time, actually take her outside. We do that same thing, kind of lean towards her and then clip, and then take her out for a walk. Now, the best thing there's a meme that says practice is not an emergency, and an emergency is not the time to practice. But that's what most of us do as humans. We don't practice till we need to do it. And then we're adding an artificial timeline that has nothing to do with the dog, and it's really sets the dog up to fail and makes you frustrated. So practice when you don't need to. If something is important, practice a lot. I'd say practice this exercise like 3 to 5 times a day. Practice in different parts of your house, and eventually you get to the point where it just becomes a game. You go in the bedroom, close the door, and she sits down, you put the leash on, give her a treat, take her out, go into the kitchen, take her off the leash, reach for her, give her attach the leash, give her a treat. We're doing these things independent of a walk. And I know she likes going on a walk, but all we want to do is just step by step by step. Now, little Miss Mila there really gets excited with it. She sees other dogs. Now, she's only 9 months old, so we usually like them playing and socializing with as many other dogs as we can. But since she's getting so excited, I might maybe have you meet only every other dog or every third dog, so that she starts getting practiced and not meeting every dog that she runs across. Now, you could also do things like when the dog's coming, just feed her treats as the other dog's walking. So take a couple steps off the sidewalk, you're in somebody's yard, and you just treat, and the treats. So we want the treat held so she's looking at the other dog, not looking the other way. So now when the other dogs pass, I get a treat. And at first I'm getting 4 treats as a pass, then I have 3 treats, then 2 treats, and then one. Now they pass, and then I get a treat. So we're giving her a little something because she wants something, but we're not helping her practice that overexcited behavior. We call it arousal. And when dogs get overexcited, just like us, they are more prone to making mistakes. And also when it comes to dog practice, the end is the most important. The last rep is the most important because that's what your dog's going to remember. So we want to make sure that we stop before the dog gets overly tired. That's why I keep practice sessions like to 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, since she's doing a little staring, we'll talk about a little bit about dog body language. So you see one of her ears is up, one of her ears is off to the side. We went over cutoff signals, and when the guardian reached over her head, the ears flipped back a little bit. She ducked her head and turned her head to the side. Cutoff signals for dogs include ducking their head, turning away, ducking their head and turning away, refusing to look at you, looking at you from the side of their eye, we call that whale eye, licking their lips, refusing to come to you, moving away from you, pulling away from you. Those are the dog's way of saying, I don't like what you're doing. Now, some dogs will also freeze. And we have little dogs like this, we often misinterpret a freeze for consent. So if your dog is frozen, ask them to touch your hand or move towards the item to gauge consent or not. So we have a whole lesson on consent, but the long and short of it is don't initiate petting your dog by reaching over their head. And remember, the 4 things. So eye contact to a dog you don't like is a challenge. Approaching the dog from the front is confrontational. Leaning over the dog is intimidating. And petting him on top of the head is interpreted as dominating. 4 things dogs don't like. So if you want to meet another dog, hold your hand out like this. If the dog touches its nose to your hand, it's saying, yes, you have my consent. Then tell them, Frida likes being petted under her chin. So Frida doesn't have to offer any cutoff signals. Her mom and dad are providing her with a safe environment and helping other people. And if somebody holds her hand out and she turns to the other side, she's saying, I don't want to meet that person. And that's okay. And if they're adamant to meet her, just, oh shoot, I forgot, we just saw the vet and she has ringworm, it's contagious, nobody's supposed to pet her. And if your dog does have ringworm, don't take it out, it's very inappropriate to do. But some people will not listen, they'll try to pet your dog, and that might result in a nip for her. She's saying, I don't want to meet him, make sure that you make sure that happens. All right, we started off the session by going over marker words. I have a video on marker words. If you forget about that, let me know. By the end of this weekend, I want you guys to have loaded the clicker with each dog 6 times, each one of you, and the yes each time. So yes, treat, and they don't have to sit or lay down or look at anything. This is just a loading exercise. We only have to do this a couple times, and after this weekend, you shouldn't have to do that anymore. Now we're just going to use it. So the instant the dog's butt hits the ground, yes, and they get a treat or a pet. Their chest hits the ground for a down, yes, and they get a treat or a pet. Eye contact, going to the dog bed, dropping an object, whatever it is. So we're going to reward them for the things that they want using the marker word so they know that's what you wanted them to do. We also went over hand targeting. I have a video for that one, so if you forget how to do that, message me if I don't have it linked above on this write-up, and you can watch that. Practice that one. Now, I would, for the hand targeting, I would have a different cue for each dog. So maybe hers is boop and Mila's is smash, whatever, however you want to do it. So that way, because she's a little bit of a guarder, I saw a couple dust-ups between the two dogs, and she's just trying to be, I want it all for myself, and she's a little bit of guarding of treats. So body language, I guess, before I go into this, I should back up because we started talking about body language. So I went over cutoff signals, but body language for dogs, I look at their head. Is their mouth open or closed? Closed mouth doesn't necessarily mean anything, but if they go from an open to a closed mouth with a stare, that's a big warning. Also, you look at her mouth is open. She's kind of looking around. She has what I call fidelity of movement. If they're snapping their head around, that's cortisol. That's not a good thing. Her ears are what they normally are. One's up and one's off to the side. They're not back or forward. She's laying down right now, but she is panting. Now, we just got done being outside and it's hot today, so that's where it's coming from. But your dog is not hot and suddenly starts panting or holding their breath. That's an indication they feel uncomfortable. Eyes. She has what we call sleepy eyes. If you can see them, she's got the classic Schnauzer cut with the eyebrows. But hard, unblinking eyes with a stare is very big warning. Sleepy eyes is approachable, confident, loving, and that sort of thing. So if you see your dog with hard, unblinking eyes and they're staring, or they go from an open mouth to like, that's a big warning. So if you see her doing that to Miss Mila, then we would pick her up. Use the pause interrupter sound, and when she looks, then use her boop sound or her, yes, you gotta stay with me, or her smash sound, a cue. So that way we can call the dogs away. So if she stares, well, you're staring a little bit. So we're going to make sure that we manage it so she can't start a fight or guard her. Mila is doing a good job of staying away when she gives her a warning, but I'd also want to mitigate that. I don't want her warning too much. I want both of the dogs to feel comfortable here. All right, so learning to read your dog's body language is when she knows she's relaxed, look at her head and her ears, her breathing, her stance. Is she leaning towards something or away? What's her tail doing? Is it standing up straight? Is it quivering? Is it moving slowly? Is it moving in the middle, side to side, which is usually accommodatable? Is it tucked? Is it between her legs? If that's the case, they're insecure. So we want to make sure that we read our dog's body language. So when your dog's happy, look at those things. Look at the head, the ears, the nose, the eyes. And the nose position. Then look at the leaning. Look at are they wiggly and jiggly, which the dogs know, or are they stiff and straight? Slow moving is also a big warning. So if you can identify what your dog's body language is when it's relaxed, then when it's excited, how is it different? When she's fearful, how is it different? When they're territorial, how is it different? After a while, you'll start recognizing when she does this combination of things, that's when she's guarding. That's when I need to call her away. All right, we also went, so going back, we went over celebrating. Celebrating is rewarding when the dog offers a behavior that we like without us asking. So the dog sits, yes, pat him under the chin. Remember, under the chin, not on top of that. Chin, chest, or the shoulders. If the dog, comes to you, gives you eye contact, lays down, yes, and pet. If I see that my dog, dog went and sat down next to my partner missed it, I say, celebrate. My partner says, yes, and pets on the chin. They don't need to know what it is. We're just going to reward. And the more that we start doing this, the more the dog will start offering those behaviors. And when the dog nudges us or paws at us or barks our attention, we're going to use the concept of a do-over and say sit or lay down. If they don't sit or lay down after the first time, within 3 seconds of me saying it the first time, then I lean back, go back to coding, making some cookies, writing a song, whatever it is we were doing. So if you don't do what I ask, that's fine. You do what you want to do, but there's no reward, and I'm not asking multiple times. Playing hard to get works great for dating, works great for dog training too. And because we're celebrating every time the dog sits, and we're asking the dog to sit when I ask for attention the wrong way, after a while the dog will start coming in front of you and sitting down to prepay for the attention. Boy, you better pet when that happens. Otherwise, you're going to get the jumping, the nipping, or all the rest of that stuff. So this is a great way to teach manners and tell each other to celebrate if they forget to do it. Manners is basically where the dog is demanding attention. So if she's nudging you, pawing at you, barking at you, you're going to tell her to sit one time. If she sits, pet her. If she doesn't, go back to doing what you're doing like I just got done talking about. So these are kind of two things. So when the dog chooses to do the right thing, we mark and reward. If the dog does the wrong thing, we give them a second chance to do it the right way. If they do it right, we mark and reward. If they don't, we do anything else we want to do. It's just for you, and I'm mic'd up, so don't worry about that. You won't even hear it. All right, so those are two sides of the same coin, but one of the questions I ask my clients, what can your dog do to contribute to your group or to make you happy? And most people can't tell me. This tells the dog, sitting, laying down, drinking water, and so All right, we also went over exercise. The dogs are doing, guardians are doing a good job of exercising them, but playing fetch, we added a little bit of structure. When the dog dropped the ball, we held it up and said, sit, sit. If Frida sat, then we say yes, then we throw and say fetch and throw the ball. If we say sit and she doesn't sit, we just lean back. Again, disengage like we talked about for manners. And manners is the watchword that I tell each other. So if you see that the dog's nudging me for attention, I'm petting absentmindedly, say manners, I'd say up, sit, and then pet the dog. Yes, I know it's hot, but we'll get you out of here in a sec. All right, so there's also treat dispensing toys and puzzles. Because she's a food guarder, and right now the guardians are free feeding, I recommend they go over to a structured feeding, which is feeding when you give them to them. I would feed them in different parts of the house, so that way she doesn't have to worry about eating really quick to go try to sit next to her and try to take her food. She doesn't have to worry about having her looking over her shoulder to see if Frida's trying to intimidate me. So you put the food in the bowl, you invite the dog to come over. Some dogs are social eaters. You might have to eat a little bit something with them. So sit down on the floor, be casual, don't be in a hurry, and call the dog over. So as soon as Frida goes over and sniffs the bowl, she's on the clock. If she sniffs it and says, I don't feel like eating, I can eat whenever I want. My food's always here. And she walks away. When she walks away, pick up her bowl, dump it empty, put the ball back on the ground. And then don't let her near Mila until Mila's done. Mila, same thing. If she hasn't eaten all of it, dump it, put it down. Put the bowl back down. So it's not ethical to withhold food, but you're providing the food. If the dog chooses to go away, that's kind of the same thing in the wild. If a dog leaves food and goes away, another animal is going to probably eat that food. So we're just emulating what happens in nature. And then after a while, what will happen is the dog, when you put the food down, the dog's going to start eating. Now she has a weight cue, and so you might want to train her, Mila, to do the same thing, and then give him different cues. So maybe her word is lasagna, and her word is sushi. So that way, eventually the dogs can be in separate rooms. Now you might feed her since she doesn't love walking, or she likes walking, just doesn't like them. Doesn't like people and dogs sometimes. Now we're going to practice that above, but in the short term, we don't want to put her on a walk if she's going to practice that barking behavior. So maybe we feed her out of a snuffle mat, or an Omega Paw Tricky Trainer treat ball, or something along those lines. So the dog has practice at solving puzzles or using its nose to find treats. Those are great ways to drain the dog's energy and build the dog's confidence as well. And so there's also enrichment games, like taking that toilet paper tube that's empty, taking a piece, or preferably a hand towel, and then taking a hand towel or a piece of newspaper, crumpling it up with a piece of kibble in it, and then shove it in that tube. Repeat that with like 10 or 15 pieces and put it on the ground. So Frida here has got to pull that stuff out, unwrap it, and then get that little tasty treat, and repeat that 5, 6, 8 times, however many are in there. I'd like you to Google scent games. And you can also, I'd have you on Facebook, look for DIY enrichment or dog enrichment groups. There's a whole bunch of free stuff that you can do as a nice way to burn energy for them. I also went over cookie in the corner. That's where we're throwing those treats and then saying come after they get it. If you need a video on that one, let me know. I have a video for that. But that introduced the concept of hunt, I believe is the cue you guys were using. It means go look for something on with your nose. Let's say you're on a walk with her and you see another dog's coming and you don't have time to do the exercise that I showed you in the video above. Maybe you just show you have a treat and throw it on the ground and say hunt. She goes and searches, throw another one a little bit beyond that. You can move her off of the street into somebody's yard looking for those treats in long grass while the other dog passes and she doesn't practice barking at them. It's a nice little management deal. But also, like I said, Google scent games. Find 2 or 3 free scent games that you can play with your dogs at home. There'll be a whole bunch of courses that come up and you can pay for the course if you want later. But just right now, just find 2 or 3 free ones so you have a couple things you can do. Let me see. We also talked about the importance of manners and the Premack principle. A less desirable behavior earns me a more desirable behavior. That's a good no bark, yes. And make sure you reward the dogs. I mean, I just did exactly what I don't want you to do verbally. I would just, when she looks like that, it doesn't bark, yes, and just pet. Don't say no bark like I did. But basically, when she passes the dog without barking, yes, and give her a treat. If somebody approaches you in a restaurant, she doesn't bark, yes, and give her a treat. Reward her for the things we want her to do. The Premack principle is just asking her to sit before we open the door. Sit before we put her food down. Sit before we give her a pet or whatever it is. Doesn't always have to be a sit. Just for dogs, it turns out sits works out really well. Make her sit every time you cross the street. Sit. As soon as she sits, yes, and then we cross the street. So the more that they have to kind of self-restrain, same thing with the fetch. As soon as, right now, she just has to drop it, and then you say sit, and then when she says sit, you say yes, then you throw it. After a while, she drops it, you pick it up, say sit, she sits, and say yes. Fetch. So eventually we're going to start increasing. So maybe it's 1 second, then 2 seconds, and 3 seconds. Eventually she boxes the ball over and she sits for 20 seconds waiting for you to throw the treat. She's self-restraining. She's practicing. Yeah, come here, sweetie. All right. Trying to think, is there anything else you want me to go over? Potty training, if I don't have the video for potty training linked above, let me know. But again, 5 minutes out. If you come back in and she doesn't potty, keep her in your lap like this until 15 minutes until she fusses. Take her back outside. Don't say potty, potty, potty. Remember, the cue, the action, the marker word, and then the reward. But when we're teaching dogs, we're usually luring, except for little Mila, who's a little bit of a weirdo when it comes to sit, but we figure out how to teach her to do that. Same thing for her. Take her into a room and practice 12 sits, 15 sits with the door closed. And when you're out, and when she's doing that, then one of you is out here working with her. And if not, just give them one of these and let them be by themselves. Practicing being by themselves is really important. You have anything else you want to add? Yes, just that I'm a happy schnauzer. All right. Well, this is my buddy. This is Miss Frida. Mila, Mila, puppy, puppy. Nope, she's saying no. That's okay. This is Mila and Frida's roadmap to success. Remember, everything you do trains your dog, only sometimes you mean it.